Ranieri tries one!
Boo! Boo, Trent! Boo! How dare you win your team a title? Am I doing this correctly? This is Not That Kind of Gooner, an Arsenal podcast, and we are coming to you after some might say a miraculous 2-2 draw at Anfield, considering how John agrees with me. Considering how that first half went, it feels like something of a minor miracle. But yeah, good draw. Positive result nearing the end of a disappointing season. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about certain aspects of the game, certain behaviors during the game that we witnessed. We'll also talk about kind of the backlash against Arteta in the media that we've witnessed recently. We'll jump into some transfer links, both for Arsenal and for other teams as well. So looking forward to diving into all of that. I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow me on Blue Sky at shamsdale.bsky.social. And with me is John. You can follow on Twitter at 305cast and on Blue Sky at yellowribbons.bsky.social. John, how are you doing?
I was muted, but like our first half performance. I think I'm all right. I've kind of come to terms with the season a little bit. So I feel like I went through this stages of grieving, and I keep kind of fluctuating through them, and I've kind of gotten to acceptance, once that was it, and then we're out of Europe, and Oh, you asked how I'm doing. I'm all right.
Also that, yeah.
I'm doing good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, glad to hear you're doing good. At least better than Arsenal are. And we also got Drew with us, who you can follow on Twitter at GeeChyKid and on Blue Sky. It's blindmandrew.bsky.social. Drew, how are you doing?
I am tired today, so there might be like a spicy, grumpy Drew on the podcast instead of a less spicy, grumpy Drew than usual. I'm good though. It's I have no, my emotions aren't affected by what happened at the weekend, so just kind of ready to talk about it, but that's about it.
Yeah, we I went off the rails a little bit during the first half. I'm not gonna lie. That was really tough to watch. By the way, you can follow the pod at Not That Gooner on Twitter, Not That Gooner.bsky.social on Blue Sky, on YouTube and Instagram. We are at Not That Kind of Gooner, and you can also email us at notthatkindofgooner@gmail.com. All those are great for us to reach out to us at and follow us and all that good stuff. But yeah, let's jump into the first half, right? Because it was a very, like John said, it was a very muted start. Didn't really try to get on the front foot quickly, and within 21 minutes we were down 2-0. And just really felt like a moment in which the team were really just going to crumble under the weight of everything that had happened this season, and the campaign as a whole was just going to kind of go out with a whimper as opposed to a bang. So really, really scary times. I definitely found myself ranting a little bit on Twitter, a little bit to a couple people privately, and it was just a tough watch. But I'll go to you first, Drew, because maybe we'll get the spicy take here. But what do you think went into that first half performance, and why do you feel like we kind of crumbled for Liverpool the way that we did?
Well, I don't think much went into it at all. I just kind of feel like there's, for me at least in the first half, there was like this general thought that the players just don't care anymore. And in a way, you could kind of understand that because of the way the season's gone, or just the fatigue of the players as well. Like there's a lot of factors into it, but that doesn't excuse it. I still think you still have standards, especially when you're in a match against a title rival. One of the big six or whatever you want to call them as well. So there's still standards you have to meet, even though it's a dead rubber in terms of we're not catching them. But we still also need to qualify for Champions League, and I think those standards slipped dramatically in the first half, and that's kind of why you saw, though we did well to come back and get a point, you saw how seething Arteta was, because he's always going to have those standards regardless of who we're playing, where we're playing, what the context of the match is. Those standards have to be maintained, and that's the only way you can maintain a title challenge as well. And I do think his reaction was probably a cumulative reaction across the season, where there are other performances where we didn't perform as well. You know, where points were dropped, losses that we shouldn't have had, draws we shouldn't have had. So I do think that's kind of all, like that reaction from him is all encompassing in terms of everything that went on in the season kind of just came out at one time. And I'm fine with that. I think his post-match comments also showed where his mind is at in terms of where we need to be and should always be, and what the level is. I'm glad that I'm glad we responded, because you can make the same argument that, you know, in years past, a different Arsenal maybe capitulates and loses 3-4, 5-0 or whatever. Maybe they get a goal. The fact that we came back, you know, got a point at a very difficult place to play on a day that's their day as well. So yeah, you know, overall I like the reaction, but I think for me it just kind of shows kind of we're still in that weird space where we're not always going to be at the level we need to be at to challenge for a league title. And that might be telling for all involved, for Arteta, for some of the players, for Berta, that kind of thing, in terms of how we're going to do business, which we'll come on to later. Yeah, so I mean, but I'm also personally, for me, I'm also needed to. I mean, it didn't excuse the performances, but I have no emotions about the season at this point. I think our chances in Champions League are over. Now, for me, it's just guaranteed we get Champions League next season. Whether that's finished second or third is pretty irrelevant in terms of, as long as we're in Champions League next season, that's kind of all that matters. I mean, if we slip to third, so be it. I would be annoyed about it, yeah, but overall, I still maintain that the fact that we're still second is an achievement in and of itself, given how the season is gone. So if we actually did slip to third, is it that bad? Probably not. You know, at least we're not United or Spurs. So that's kind of where my head is at the moment. But yeah, those are kind of my overall thoughts, at least for the moment.
Yeah. How about you, John?
Yeah, you mentioned United and Spurs. Drew just did. It still feels a little weird that I think at the end of the day, if one of them come away with a European trophy, they're going to think they had a better season than us, and there's a good argument for that. Unfortunately, at least when it comes to silverware, right? I think over a whole season, in terms of what we did and how far we got in the Champions League, for what you want to consider progress in the club and like hope for the future, we're obviously miles and miles ahead of them. But for what did you actually get from the season, we got absolutely nothing in terms of silverware. And I'm not really in the camp of silverware is everything, but with a manager that needs some soon, given the progress that we made and the players that we have, and you know how good we are, because we know that we're really good, to not have silverware since that FA Cup win that Arteta had is a little shocking for us, I think. So maybe I wouldn't say they have a better season than us, but again, a European trophy would look really nice and would make the season a lot better. Let me put it that way. So I don't know. I'm still like kind of processing. I've accepted this season to an extent. I think it was clear what our shortcomings were, so that gives me a little bit of hope, I guess. Right? It would be one thing if we're sitting here and we don't know what went wrong, right? And we're just saying, "Oh, we're so good," and we just, things happen and we can't figure it out. It's very glaringly obvious what we need to do to get to that next level. But you always have that fear of, other teams progressing in the time where you should have capitalized. And that's that fear that I have. And I think a lot of fans share that it should have been our season last season, should have been our season the year before maybe, but like all of these factors came into play. Poor scouting decisions in many departments, or rather poor business decisions, not getting the kind of players that we need, kind of kicking the can maybe to an extent, you could argue, with respect to player acquisitions. I know that we made some big moves. You look at Declan Rice, that was kind of game changing, but we also lost Granit Xhaka, which I thought was, a big factor that stalled, I think, our progression from an attacking perspective, and it took a while to kind of overcome that. And I think that's kind of not talked about enough about how losing Granit Xhaka affected our attack. So because we needed to kind of figure that out, and we had Rice, who came in last season, who was not really making that position his own. People were even wondering, should he be a 6? Why is he playing that far ahead? He's clearly shown that he's an excellent player, but now you start having issues on the wing with Martinelli kind of being one-dimensional, and I guess we can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it was a weird end to the season. It's another season that we don't walk away with any silverware, which sucks. But you mentioned the record against the top 6. I think this might be a little dated, but the numbers that we have days since Arsenal last lost to a big 6 team, I don't know if these are accurate, but they're close. 630 days was the last time we lost to City. 964 days last time we lost to United. 1,136 days is the last time we lost to Liverpool in the league. I don't know why Spurs are on this list, but 1,079 days since we lost to Spurs, and likewise with Chelsea, 1,342 days since we lost to Chelsea. So if you would look at it from a progress perspective, we dreaded these big 6 fixtures, especially towards the end of Wenger's reign, and definitely into Emery's reign. That was a big problem, and we've eliminated the fear of the big 16 fixtures in the Premier League. And if you remember, during the Wenger times, it was, we can beat the smaller teams, but we struggle against these top teams. And now that, because of that, you have this issue where you lose out on necessary points in such a small margin, kind of a league. You end up losing the title because of that. Now it's kind of this weird situation where we're doing okay against the big teams, but then we struggle against some of the smaller teams sometimes, and it's kind of flip-flopped in a weird way. And I think now we just need to be more consistent. We've gotten that kind of issue off our shoulder with the big teams, and now we just need to be consistent and capitalize when we need to. And I think in order to do that, it comes down to striking. It comes down to getting someone who puts the chances away that we're going to need to make. Defensively, we're very solid. Our midfield is solid. We just need to make those upgrades, and we need to sort that out, because once that happens, we have to figure that we're going to get some silverware. I mean, that seems to be the logical step.
Yeah. I'm going to push back on a couple things that you said kind of near the top. The first thing is the Europa League of it all, where like I know I'm in the gross minority here, but I don't really value the Europa League as a proper trophy, to be quite honest. And like I know some people do. I know, like, you're absolutely right when you say that when either United or Spurs win it, their fans are going to hold that up as making their seasons better than ours, which is absolutely just going to be a bad faith argument from the beginning. That Spurs and United at this point have lost 20 and 17 Premier League games this season, respectively. There's no world where I would take that over what we have right now. And with the Europa League, you could even talk me into thinking that, or into agreeing that it was a serious trophy as lately as last year, but just they were playing Athletic Bilbao and Bodo Glimt in the semifinals, and like I think what we're about to witness in the coming few years, especially now that Champions League teams don't drop into the Europa League, is just a huge decrease in quality. And I've seen Arsenal fans say that they wish, or that they hope, we're in the Europa League next season because they know that we'd walk it and win a trophy. I don't know. That feels like, and
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it.
No, yeah, I know that's not what you're saying, but yeah.
The last, we won what in 1994. We won a European trophy in the field. And then before then, it's been like the 90s basically. and it wasn't like a major European trophy. So that's kind of what it's something that we haven't done. We haven't won a major European trophy. And I guess you can argue whether Europa League is a major European trophy, but it is one of the biggest European trophies. So I get what you're saying, but I think I still would like a European trophy for a club. I think obviously I want the Champions League, but silverware itself is kind of what I'm really getting at, is that we need to win something. Call it FA Cup, call it whatever. I mean, we need some silverware at some point.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely take like the FA Cup or the EFL Cup and all that. I think I think the Europa League could have qualified as a major trophy from like last year and before, but I think over the coming years we're really going to see it become undervalued just by seeing the teams that are in it. But
time for us to actually win it, right? By the time if we're somehow we'll end up winning it, and then it's at that point it's an irrelevant trophy.
People don't want to hear this, but odds are pretty good that at some point in the next decade we're going to be back in the Europa League, just because of the number of teams that are good enough to qualify for the top 4, top 5, whatever it is.
Well, I don't know if I agree. I really disagree, because I feel like the one thing that I always fall back to is that we can say what we want about indecision, but we're a better run football club as an institution than most other clubs. And I think to make yourself sustainable in the top 4 or 5 or however many places are going to drop down to the Champions League, given how the new system works, so let's just call it maybe averaging 5 English teams in the Champions League every season, I can't look at more than 3 or 4 other clubs that are as run as well. And one of the reasons why United are where they are is because they're so poorly run. Same with Spurs. I don't know if Villa and Forest are sustainable enough to continue to be top 4 or 5 sides. Obviously, City and Liverpool will be there because they're also well run in respect. I have a lot of respect for how Liverpool are run. City just buy their way into success, and it is what it is at this point, and we'll come on to that later in this podcast too. But I think, and you kind of see it, you see it all the time where you have clubs that are massive footballing institutions that are run poorly and they tank and they get relegated. Schalke in Germany, or one Schalke, people don't understand how big Schalke is in Germany. They're huge, top 4 club in Germany. Hamburg is probably 5th. They've both been in Bundesliga 2 for a couple of years now, and Hamburg's got promoted again, so congrats to them. We just saw Sampdoria has gone down to Serie C, which is insane because they formerly used Serie A champions. I'm pretty sure they won European honors as well, and in their past, that's some massive players play for them. They're now going to the 3rd tier of Italian football. So I do feel like you have to give yourself the platform to succeed, and maybe you'll do it in spurts, but to constantly be at or near the top, you have to run yourself well on the back end and smartly as well. And a lot of clubs, when they get a lot of money, they don't know how to spend it. And that's why you get situations like Chelsea, who, they have all the money in the world, but do I look at Chelsea and am I afraid of Chelsea currently? No. If they become smarter with their money, will I actually begin to see them as more like a City type club? Maybe, but there's no indication that Bowley and company are going to ever get to that point. So, but I also agree with John that I do think, I'm sure we'll come on to this too, I do think we're at the point now, and I said this also, I said it to you, Sham, I said it to another group chat I'm in, that next season I do think is for the first time, I think fans could probably say we have to win major honors next season, or you may have to ask a question or two. And I absolutely adore Arteta, let's be clear. I think what he's done with this club is phenomenal. The way he's more or less broadly united the fan base has been great. We've stuck to our culture as well. All those things are great, but at some point you do need those like tangible bits of success. And the only thing I will say is it's good to know that whenever KSC has taken a club on, or a team or a franchise or whatever, eventually they have actually won the biggest honor. They've gone on to do it. So that's why I still remain optimistic. But I think if next season, if we have the big summer we're hoping for, expecting or demanding, and we get it, and then we don't succeed, then it's hard to look at anything other than Arteta being like, okay, are you actually still the guy to bring us forward? I'm not an Arteta guy. But I do also think that if you are a big club, there are standards you have to meet. And it's ironic that we've when this all first started, the soundbite was we want to become like Bayern. And as much as I detest Bayern and every facet of who they are as a footballing institution, I also admire them because they're the best run club in the world. And they don't let the standards slip. Like the one season they didn't win Bundesliga last season was like a cataclysmic event. And they
fixed it.
Yeah, and to be clear, Company had to win the Bundesliga this season, or else he would be fired as we speak. If they didn't win Bundesliga this season, they would have sacked him. And despite that, they're going out and looking at bringing in Jonathan Tah and Florian Wirtz from their biggest rival to shore up the fact that they need to remain at the pinnacle of German football while also competing in Champions League, which is something they have not done in a while. So I do think all those things when they become all encompassing. This is why I say to people it's such a monumental summer, but at the same time, I think, not you, I'm saying people in general also, I think, underestimate how hard it is to remain at the top for a long period of time, especially in a league like the Premier League, because money also always conflates what the actual job is. Sometimes money can only be like a shot in the arm. It's what you do with that money when you start getting a lot of it is what matters most. And I think we've done that better than most clubs have come up against domestically. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that we're gonna screw up and like end up like crashing into the Europa League for a few seasons. All I was saying is that you have 4 or 5 spots, and I think it's us, Liverpool, City, and then I think Newcastle might be something to worry about in the future.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about Chelsea. Chelsea, I think, will get into the Champions League at some point in the coming few years, but I think the Bowley Egbali model, I think those two have made it very clear that they're aiming for profit more than they're aiming to compete for things. But you never know like what's going to happen down the road. Like this year we had Nottingham Forest in 3rd place for 90% of the season. Like Brentford could do that. Brighton could do that. Maybe Villa don't collapse this season after not making the Champions League. Although I find that hard to believe given their wages to revenue ratio that the Deloitte Money League informed us of. Yeah, I'm not saying that we're going to screw up big time or anything in the coming decade. I'm just saying that maybe one season things don't work out in our favor, like the way they have this time around, and just we don't perform well enough, and we just end up in 5th or 6th or whatever. But I don't think that's going to happen for a while, and I am still very optimistic about the direction the club's going in terms of whether or not Arteta has to win something next season. I do largely agree, especially if we do invest the way that we're expecting to. But I always just try to leave a little bit of room in those expectations for circumstances
like this season.
Exactly.
Right,
like
yeah.
if this season happens again next year, like if we signed Isak and Rodrigo and Zubamendi and Housen, right? And like 3 of those guys got injured for 4 or 5 months of the season, we're kind of back to where we are right now. So, but if Arteta has what he had last season, where basically most of the squad is fit for the entire season, they're performing at a high level, no major like refereeing issues week in, week out that's costing us double digits worth of points and all that, and we still don't win something, then yeah, I mean, I'll definitely have questions for Arteta, because that means at some point along the line we dropped points in places where we shouldn't have, and we had the resources to deal with it. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see in that regard. I just kind of wanted to talk about the Europa League because we haven't really addressed that on here yet. But turning back to the match, sort of, real quick. Obviously, we turned it around. We made it 2-2. We got the point out of it. But I want to get you guys' take on the Trent situation, because, like everyone in the world saw, Trent stepped on the pitch, was subbed on to Booze, touched the ball, got booed again, was booed at full time when he was applauding the fans. And obviously, this is because he's leaving on a free this summer, almost assuredly to Real Madrid. But I personally, I know Jamie Carragher did this big thing about, we shouldn't tell Liverpool fans how to feel, yada yada. I personally don't really care. People tell Arsenal fans how to feel all the time, so I feel entitled to tell Liverpool fans how to feel. And if they don't want to listen to me, that's fine. That's whatever. There's lots of opinions out there. Pick and choose which one you want to follow. But I personally thought it was in really poor taste. And I in particular, I remember seeing Dominique Szoboszlai just clapping and hearing the boos, and then just kind of doing like a what the fuck gesture. And the media, I think, has picked up on it, and they're going after the Liverpool fans again today. And a lot of people are a lot of prominent, Liverpool writers, I think, are having to defend the fan base and all that. And I think it's an ugly moment. I've heard people compare it to the Ange and Spurs moment. I'm not sure it's that bad per se, but I do think this is going to turn into something of a blemish on the reputation of the club as a whole. Because you also had Virgil van Dijk and Arne Slot kind of, I would say, making subtle digs at Trent in their post-match comments. So, John, I'll go to you first here. Just what do you make of the Trent hate, and do you think it's justified, or do you think Liverpool fans really should have just calmed down a little bit?
I understand the hate. I mean, it's you have someone like that. It would, he's not Bukayo Saka, but just imagine Saka had an opportunity to be sold for big money and then goes for free somewhere. I'd understand the anger behind that, right? I personally wouldn't boo Saka even if he did that, just because, I understand why the player does what they do as well. I understand the motivations behind that. So from a perspective of, do I understand the fans? Yes. Would I have done that? No. But I come back to this notion that, booing, that's kind of what the fans have to express themselves. All right. So, if I can understand the motivations behind it, and while I might not agree with it, I do respect the right that they have to express themselves in a non-violent way and in the way that they know how, which is to boo while at the stadium while the player can hear you. How else are you going to let someone, know that you're not happy with them? So from that perspective, I think I get why they were doing it, and I think that that's the best avenue to do it, to express your frustration with a player. Personally, again, I want to come back to this. Personally, I wouldn't do that, given what he's done for the club, but you can kind of see where they're coming from. Certainly, especially not getting any money from him, for him, which I guess could be directed less at the player and more at the management for allowing that to happen, in the club and the ownership for allowing that to happen. I think people have kind of an unrealistic view, or maybe a romantic ideological view of how players view playing football. I think at the end of the day, they make decisions based off of a lot of factors. A lot of them involve, glory in the sport. A lot of them involve family wishes, monetary considerations, and all of these things kind of balance out and to make a decision onto what to do with your career. So it's not just X, Y, Z. And I think a lot of players like a lot of fans like to project what they value in supporting the club and the players onto what the players should value. And I don't think that those things are necessarily identical. And most times they aren't. And I bet there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. I know for a fact there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, conversations with family, like I said, conversations with, other players, and conversations with the coach and the management about what their roles are and their agents about what their futures are. And, they want to do what's best for themselves. They want to do what's best for their family. Sometimes they want to do what's best from a sporting perspective. Sometimes it's a mixture of all of them. So it's a complicated process. And I think that it would be far too generalized to say fans shouldn't or fans should feel a certain way, a certain way, anytime a player leaves, like the way TAA did. But I also think it's not right to say fans shouldn't be able to express themselves in the way that they feel do, as long as it's nonviolent. And this was nonviolent protest, so I can't really blame them. But again, don't agree with how they did. I don't agree. I wouldn't have done that. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. No, I think that's really fair, and I think that's a really good point about how that is kind of the only way fans have to express themselves. It isn't running onto the pitch and like punching him in the face or something, or abusing him online. So I think that's a really fair point. I guess to kind of edit my qualm with it. I just think, and it's basically what you said kind of at the end there, where Liverpool fans have this weird expectation that Liverpool is a forever thing for all their players, and that's just not how football ever really has been. Like some of Liverpool's greatest players have left Liverpool to go to Real Madrid, right? Steve McManaman, Michael Owen, Xabi Alonso, and now Trent Alexander-Arnold all have left Liverpool to join Real Madrid. Like, it's almost a pipeline at this point. And I don't say that as a dig. I say that to say, like there's some guy I saw online today who tweeted, nobody in Liverpool, whether they wear red or blue, ever dreams of playing for any other club but like those two clubs in Liverpool. And I just think that's silly, because Real Madrid's the biggest club in the world. Like, I feel like almost every footballer, if they're not a Barcelona fan, on some level in the back of their head, thinks of maybe one day I can play for Real Madrid. So to have that opportunity, I'm sure the vast majority of professional footballers would jump at it, because it just seems to be like a pinnacle of the professional football experience. So to kind of hold it against him in that way, and kind of if you're mad at him, that's fine. If you want to boo him, then sure. But like to actively try to belittle the legacy that he leaves behind, I think is an interesting choice. But Drew, what are your thoughts here? And do you agree with me and John, or do you see it differently?
I mean, I'm always the kind of person that feels like it's not my job to tell people how to feel. But at the same time, I'm also the first person to say that I can separate logic from emotions very well. So for me, I look at it, and John alluded to it, as from a sporting perspective, for a professional footballer, Real Madrid is the pinnacle of your career. If you have a chance to go, you'll probably take it. And Trent now is, coming into his prime. He'll not have a better chance if he extended with the club for 2 or 3 years or whatever. And would he go to Real Madrid at 30 or whatever, or however old he would be by then? Probably not. Would they want him by then? Probably not. So it's an opportunity for him to get to say, I played for the biggest club on the planet. And it doesn't mean he doesn't love Liverpool. It doesn't mean he doesn't love Merseyside. It's where he's from. I'm sure there's 0% love lost from him. But strictly from a career standpoint, it's really hard to turn down the chance to go play for the biggest club the sport's ever had. And to be clear, Real Madrid year on year have a better chance of winning Champions League than Liverpool do. That probably plays into it in some degree. And what I would say is, I do think there's a social aspect that people aren't really grasping. It's a lot of people who are from Liverpool, that part of the country, definitely feel like there's an us versus the rest of everybody else mentality because of how Liverpool and that region has been treated socioeconomically for a very long time, right? And that's part of where that mentality comes from, and I can understand that too. Sometimes it's the reason why you'll see certain people from, like, Boston feel a certain way, or Detroit, or certain parts of New York City, Baltimore, whatever. If you're looking at like an American perspective, where like, this is like, we want our own to stay with our own because we can only protect our own, kind of thing. So from a social angle, I could maybe understand that, but at the same time, like, this player helped you not only win Champions League but win the Premier League, and you can be mad at him, but you should still celebrate what he's helped you achieve and clap him off. You can still be angry, but I feel like the outward reception, I think, is a bit much, and the fact that you had some players reacting, asking like kind of like a what the fuck moment, I think is justified, because as I just said before, you have Jonathan Tah is leaving Bayer Leverkusen, is probably going to Bayern Munich. I guarantee Leverkusen fans aren't going to boo him when he goes back to the Bayern Arena with Bayern Munich. They will more than likely celebrate him and say thank you for your contributions. They'll clap him off, and he's been at that club for a very long time. Helped them win Bundesliga, helped them do a double last season. They're probably not going to hate him when he comes back. And there's a bigger rivalry between Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich than there is with Liverpool and Real Madrid. And the thing that blows my mind is that Liverpool fans are saying he's going to a major sporting rival. No, he's not. There isn't a single Real Madrid fan that looks at Liverpool and says they're a rival. I promise you, not a one. So why do you think they're a rival? Just because you both might challenge for Champions League doesn't make him going to a rival. That's weird to me. That to me is like the weirdest part of the argument. And you've seen it before where Luis Figo went from Barcelona to Real Madrid. That's cardinal sin territory type stuff, right? You've had Andrea Pirlo went from AC Milan to Juventus. And Milan fans to this day still don't hate on him. He's still celebrated and appreciated across all time football because he's a generational type player, right? So I do think there's probably like my issue with the whole thing is I think there's a slight tinge of like over realized self-importance to Liverpool fans with the club, and I do sometimes. I mean, that's not me saying Liverpool isn't a big club, because they are. They're a top 10 club in the world in terms of sporting success, supporter base. Liverpool's big, but they are bigger than Liverpool. So I think some of this reaction, or most of the reaction, I think is more of a social one than a sporting one for me. And in that way, maybe that does make sense to me. But at the same time, if you're so about, you'll never walk alone, and we back our own and we want to love our own, then you should love the fact that one of your own is now getting to the pinnacle of the sport, which 0.0000001% of Liverpudlians will never get to, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So if anything, you can be angry he's leaving, but also support the fact that he's getting to do something that most people in the world will never do. Like the basically no one by comparison, if you look at like the mathematics behind it, right? So that for me is it's a weird thing. But I'm with John. I won't tell them to not be angry, but at the same time, you should also be backing him to succeed. You should be happy that he's A, helped you win major honors, but B, he's good enough to go play for the biggest club on the planet. And that's a testament to what people can achieve, and you should be supportive of your own. That's kind of where I'm at. So
yeah, no, it sounds like we're all on similar pages here. And the way I think about it that you guys have kind of hinted at here is if we win a Champions League and 2 Premier Leagues with Saka, and then he leaves on a free somewhere, like we're still probably going to build a statue of him outside the Emirates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's.
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if some people boo Saka at that point. Listen, I was at the Man City game back in like 2015 when Arsenal fans booed Sagna, who came on.
You mean Nusri?
No,
Bakary Sagna.
Oh, Sagna. I said Saka.
Yeah, and that was like, and City at that point weren't really a rival of ours. They were kind of, it was like
turning into what they are now.
I think booing is just, I come back to this, booing is just kind of like the easiest way at a live event to express your distaste for something one way or another. And I feel like there's this thing where if one person starts doing it, like the kind of tribe, like the collective people just start joining in, even and then maybe think about it after. I remember at the time, I kind of felt the urge to be like, yeah, boo, and then I was like, no, wait, what am I doing? So there's like this kind of like collective live atmosphere that kind of takes people up. So I maybe that's another aspect of it where all these people might not really, but everyone around you starts doing it, so you jump in, and then it kind of exponentially goes from there. So that might be another factor, but I might be giving them too much credit. They might just be dumb, which is probably.
But I think the difference is like I don't see people like retracting the fact that they booed him off at Anfield. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's not like upon reflection, maybe I shouldn't have done it. No, it's like they're holding firm and doubling down, which means it was definitely intentional. But I do think that like crowd mentality and and it can be pervasive and can take hold. I agree with you. But what I think the comparison for me is we lost Van Persie to Man United. For me, that's boo worthy because to me, United still are our biggest sporting rival in the Premier League. Full stop. It's not Spurs, it's not Chelsea, it's not City, it's United. So
I see what Sham's saying though. It'd be like if you saw Arsenal fans booing like Henry when he went to like.
I wouldn't boo him. I love him to death. I could never.
You know what I mean? Like,
be,
he went to Barcelona, and it's like, how can you boo that guy? Like, how can you boo
He's going to the second biggest club in the world.
Yeah, how can you boo Saka? How can you boo? I get that, and it's just, and so Sham, your point is well taken because it's like. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I wouldn't personally do it, and I don't really understand like the mentality of doing that. But like, I can see the context of it, and I guess I'm going to contradict myself. I can see why maybe you would do it, even though I personally couldn't fathom booing someone like Saka or like Thierry or whatever.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely context that change it for me, right? Like Van Persie, I don't really have much love for him, right? Nope. Because like Drew said, he left to a direct rival, right? But with Fabregas, I was mad for a while, but I came to kind of forgive that because Barcelona was kind of home for him, and he had an opportunity to go back. I don't like the way he left necessarily, but if we were to sack Arteta at the end of next season. And Fabregas was around.
That's another discussion. That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole hour on its own. But that's kind of where I am with Fabregas. But like Adebayor, I hate Adebayor because he left the club and he turned into the biggest asshole.
Well, I mean, Van Persie too.
Semmer and Nasri as well. Nasri the same thing. I think how people conduct themselves after leaving matters. I don't think Trent would go to Real Madrid and start shitting on Liverpool. No. Right. Fabregas, for me, I think facilitated in our fan base because Fabregas has been pretty kind about his words about Arsenal after leaving, right? Henry still, Henry's been critical, but you can tell he still adores the club. He still adores the fan base, right? Van Persie, when he left, he became like the biggest POS after leaving. Adebayor, same thing. Nasri, same thing. Sagna was always still pretty pro Arsenal after he left. So I feel like, again, contextually, that makes sense. I would agree with Liverpool fans if Trent rocks up to Bernabeu and the next day he's like, fuck Liverpool, then go off on him. You know what I mean? But like at the moment, like there's no reason to do that. So I don't know, like play it by ear, I guess.
Please, I hope that'd be so. Can you, Matt? That'd be so funny.
All I'm saying is I want Real Madrid to draw Liverpool in a knockout match in the Champions League next season.
Yeah, but knowing UEFA, it'll happen. So just give it time.
Oh man, that'd be so. Just put Adam Silver in charge of UEFA. It'll happen. Yeah. That guy will rig the draw so hard so that it happens.
It's true.
Yeah. And then Trent like 2 foots Allison and breaks his leg for the half of the season, and then that's
scores a 35-yard screamer to knock them out.
Yeah, and breaks his legs
and then celebrates. So
yeah. If I wouldn't do that at Anfield if I were him.
No, probably not.
I would do it. I support you, Trent. Celebrate. Take your shirt off in front of the cop. Go.
Oh no. Oh man. Okay. Well, tell you what. Since we're already kind of at the 45-minute mark, I do want to hit this one last thing before we start talking about transfers, which is there's been a lot of Arteta slander, I guess is the word that's coming in mind right now. Over the last few weeks, people have had a lot of problems with his comments and pressers. The ones that are coming to mind right now are there's one where he said, Liverpool won the title with fewer points than we had last season, the season before. There's that one, and then there's one obviously where after PSG beat us, he said that we were the best team in the match, best team in the competition, yada yada. A lot of people have taken issue with both those comments. I think they've been largely taken out of context or purposefully misunderstood for a bit of content. But I'll get onto that in a second. But yeah, just Drew, what do you make of kind of this backlash that Arteta's facing, and do you Do you think any of it is deserved, or do you think he's making a good point with a lot of this stuff? Or there's reasons why maybe it didn't come off the way he thought or the way he intended it to.
I think like anything, when Arteta speaks in the media, it gets twisted instantaneously, and it gives you sound bites. And engagement farming is such a big deal for major media outlets, and quite frankly, they don't have to care about if how they interpret what Arteta says is true or not, as long as they get clicks and views and they get sponsorship revenue or whatever. For me, I understand what he's saying. When you look at the points accumulation, if you've accumulated the second most points in the Premier League over the last 2 seasons, and you've done it to that level, to say that you've been very good and could be Premier League champions isn't a false statement. Yes, you still have to go on and win the league, but I think what Arteta is saying is that, listen, we're still performing at a very good level, right? Like the inquest from some fans at the end of the season, I think is maybe a bit like unwarranted, because we all know the context about this season, and we saw how close we were to winning the league last season, which is why most people had us finishing top 2 this season, and why most of us, I think at least the 3 of us for sure, maintain that had we have had Liverpool's injury luck this season, we probably would be Premier League champions this season, just off the back of our record against the Big Six, how we performed overall, that kind of thing. So, I get what he's trying to say. I do think like I think it's going to get blown out of proportion, because it's easy to do that. And I do think you see this might be a bit tinfoil hat, or it might be assumptive on my part, but I think the English media and press do it more often when the manager is foreign. They did it with Wenger habitually. They still do it with Pep. As much as I don't like Pep, they constantly misconstrue what he's saying. They'll often take Postecoglou out of context, and he's literally a native English speaker.
Well, look at what they did with Tuchel.
Look what they did with Tuchel, same thing. They did it with Klopp when he first arrived as well. So I do think it even could just be that, I don't want to get into a rant about it. We do know that how English media portrays English versus non-English across multiple bounds, not just from the sporting perspective, does tend to lend to a bias, right? So maybe there's some of that as well. But overall, I do think, to me, it's clear what he was saying. I think, like I said before, it's just him highlighting that we've been good enough to win the Premier League by now for the last 2 seasons, right? So I think that's him saying you could expect some more from us next season. We know what the standard is. We can see the points accumulations total, and despite the context of the season, that where we are over the last 2 years points to where we're headed, right? So, and I think that's him setting the standard for where he thinks we should be next season, and that's exactly what you want from your manager. You want that pressure, right? And if players can't perform to that pressure, you get players who can. Basically. So yeah, I have no issues with what he said, how he said it. I understood the context behind it, and to me, I think it was pretty clear. So,
well, and also, people are coming out and flat out saying that he's lying, that he's making stuff up, and he's not, because this is what really pisses me off. What he said was Liverpool needed fewer points to win the title this year than we needed the previous 2 seasons, and that's correct.
That's factually correct.
People are misunderstanding it and being like, oh no, like, he's saying that 90 points is it? No one's talking about 90 points. Liverpool needed 82 this season to clinch the title. That is an objective fact. They needed 82. Last season, we put up 89 points, didn't win the title. The season before that, we scored 84 points, didn't win the title. That's all Arteta is saying. And that's what he means when he talks about timing. Right. And this is something that I think that people really don't understand, which is you can be the best team on paper in any given season, but sometimes things do not work out in your favor. You might end up with a start of the season that is Liverpool away, City away, Newcastle away, Chelsea away, Brentford away, and then sprinkle in a couple tough home games as well. And you could suddenly be 15 points off first place already by the end of October, right? Or you could have an injury situation from a nightmare where 9 of your best players are out for 4 to 6 months apiece, and you have to deal with that. Or you could, I don't know, have 2 completely made up red cards be given to you every couple of months, and you lose points based off of that, and that affects your season, right? Like a bunch of things can go wrong. And on top of that, if those things, also go in your favor, you could be up against a team that's just on a crazy run. Like, you could be up against City's historic second half run from last season, or you could be up against 99-point Liverpool back in 1920, So for me, winning trophies at the highest level is all about competing and being part of that conversation over and over and over and over again, season after season after season, until one or two of those seasons, things will shake out your way, right? And you'll get the breaks that you need to, and you'll get the matchups that you need to, and you'll win something at the end of it, right? For me, competing for silverware is it's all about the law of averages at the end of the day. And if you maintain a supremely high standard for long enough, you will win something. And a lot of people think winning trophies is step 1, win a trophy. Step 2, open top bus parade. And that's not how it works. So I think Arteta was spot on with those comments. And I think he had a point when he said that we are the better team against PSG. I don't necessarily agree with it, but the stats will back that up. So, I'm with you, Drew, when you say that this is all about engagement farming, because I think every time Arteta says something, Arteta's pretty honest, unless he's talking about, injury news.
Right.
And so, he'll say what he's thinking. He'll say what he believes most of the time. And I just think a lot of these guys, especially, bitter former managers like Gary Neville and Liverpool fans who want their team to establish a dynasty in the Premier League, like Jamie Carragher, they're just waiting for something to latch onto and turn it into an unnecessarily big deal and let it snowball from there.
And
But
I think it's the
John,
perfection that, real fast before John goes, it took Felix Ferguson, 6 seasons to win his first trophy at Man United? Jurgen Klopp took, I don't remember happening yourself with Klopp, but Klopp didn't come in and immediately start winning things. It took him time. And I think it's funny that
Klopp won 1 title in 9 attempts.
Yeah, which is we at the moment, who knows if he'll do it, but Arteta could have a better Premier legacy than Klopp by the time he hits the same 9-year mark, for all we know. I mean, we could go on and win the next Premier League title for all we know, and all of a sudden the narrative's out there with it, right? So just want to throw that in there. But yeah, let's hear from John, please.
I mean, the only thing I'll add is about the points thing. I mean, you look at the last 3 seasons, Liverpool have finished with 232 points. We finished 241, and Manchester City has finished with 245. In those 3 seasons, so that means we are second. And Liverpool has finished third in terms of points. Man City finished first in terms of points. They have 2 titles. Liverpool have 1. We have none. So I agree with you. It seems like, and then the next one, Newcastle, over those 3-year period is 197 points, and then 192 in Aston Villa, 174 in United, 170 with Chelsea, and then, believe it or not, 165 with Brighton. So, we're in a different echelon in terms of what we've performed over the last 3 seasons point wise. Your point's well taken, Sham, about the law of averages, is that I think I tend to believe that we'll fall on the right side of that eventually if we keep up the way that we are and we correct the issues that we need to. Unfortunately, it's also, the law of averages. You would think that your chances of landing heads when you flip a coin changes the number of times that you flip it, but the reality is there's nothing in statistics that's saying that you can't flip it. It's the same probability every time you flip. I guess you could talk about physics and how you flip it, but assuming all else is equal, there's always a 50% chance that it lands on heads or tails, and it could theoretically land on heads or tails. I'm sure there's some very complicated statistics that show that maybe that's not accurate, but it's the same amount, and there's nothing really that says we couldn't continue to finish second for the conceivable future and not actually win a title. That's technically possible, but you would think, just the way that the league is, it's not a perfect system, we're bound to win one eventually if we keep it up. So I tend to believe that.
Yeah. No, I think it's just, like I said, it's all about just being there and being in the conversation and continuing to accumulate some of the most points in the league.
Yeah.
I feel like if you put up the most points in the league over like 5 years and you don't win a title, that's just wildly unlucky at that point. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I just
Or
thought it was
fixed.
interesting. Yeah.
Or fixed.
Or fixed. Also there's that.
Anyway, moving on. That's another topic.
So Jamie Gittins. Yeah. But yeah, we've been linked to, obviously, because the season's basically at an end now, and all that's left is qualifying for the Champions League, which I think we only need 1 point to do, unless Aston Villa scored 26 goals, if I have that right. So we should be okay, even if we lose to Newcastle. Just don't embarrass us on the final day, Arsenal. But the transfer links are coming out. I think we're gearing up for a very busy summer ahead. We've talked about Gyökeres before. Those links are still persisting. They're still out there. If it is to be believed, it sounds like we are maybe making a move for him. We'll see. But a couple new links have come out recently, kind of linking us to guys like Jamie Gittins and Rodrigo, apparently. Alex Goldberg, who's like very well connected with Chelsea, kind of revealed that he heard a couple things about Arsenal as well. And one of those things was that we are very interested in Rodrigo. So, just kind of in that realm on in the winger aspect. And obviously Nico Williams is still an option, and apparently we're interested in Antoine Semenyo. Just who do you think you would prefer the most to come in at that left wing position right now? And John, I'll go to you first.
I like Nico Williams.
Yeah,
I've liked him for a long time. I wanted him when we were like kind of heavily linked to him and trying to get him. I just think he's such an amazing player, and I think that he would fit our system very, very well. I think that the kind of style, that tenacious style of play, and I think that ability to take players on. I think that one thing that I've always kind of harped on with Martinelli is just his lack of a second or third or fourth dimension. I think he's very one dimensional, and that's not my words 100% either. So I remember there was an Athletic article that came out about scouts that were looking how to play us when kind of Arteta's team was looking kind of, dominant. And one of the things that a scout from another Premier League team was saying was when they were preparing for how they were going to play Arsenal, they would target that side especially, and that they would focus defensively on that side or less so, because they knew they can kind of shut Martinelli off easier than they could Bukayo Saka, which is why they would double team him and do things like that. And I think what you see with Martinelli as well, that's kind of a little bit concerning to me, is he's done a little bit better. He plays with his eyes down a lot. And it tends to lean him into blind alleys. He's gotten better at beating players. Like he does it now when he gets in the box, he'll kick it and run around them. So he's trying, but I just don't think the skill set is there comparative to a player like Nico Williams, who I think would absolutely step us up on that side. And it would be having to defend on one side against Nico Williams and on one side against Bukayo Saka, I think is an absolute nightmare. I don't think that defenses are going to know what to do. They're going to be dragged all over the place. And you add a striker who has some clinical finishing to it, and I think that's a recipe for success. So that's my pick.
Yeah. No, I think Nico Williams is a really good shout. Nico Williams, to me, strikes me as a player that you can't leave one-on-one with your fullback.
How many times is Martinelli one-on-one? All the time.
A lot.
And sometimes, maybe every once in a while it'll come. So we can get into that position all the time. We're so effective at getting our left back one-on-one, our left wing one-on-one with their right back. Or whoever's defending, because the right back's been pulled out of position. We're very efficient at that. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. Now put Nico Williams in there instead of Martinelli.
Yeah. Well, Williams is a guy who has speed, has trickery, has inventiveness, right? If he's going to try to beat you one-on-one, and if he can't beat you one-on-one, he'll try to either cut in and shoot, or cut in and cross, or he'll try to take to the byline and cut in. And Martinelli can do those things, but I just think, well, first of all, with Nico Williams, I think there's a bit more quality in those deliveries, and those cutbacks and those shots. But also, I think with Martinelli, it's more of if this happens, then I do this, and then if this happens, I do this kind of thing. It's very rote and mechanical. Whereas with Nico Williams,
Jazz.
you don't know. You have to be prepared for anything. So that's what I like about him. I think that's a good shout. Drew, how about you? Who's kind of your pick of the bunch?
I I don't know currently because I feel like it's not just it's not an answer that comes that easily because I feel like there's too much context surrounding it. I think it depends on the kind of winger you want and also depends on the kind of center forward you buy. Just looking at some brief numbers real fast while you guys were chatting, I feel like sometimes people look at Martinelli and I think their biggest gripe with him is his inconsistency, which is a fair complaint. I think sometimes he'll run the gambit. There'll be spurts of matches where he performs and you're thinking like this is the player that we got when he scored 15 league goals 2 seasons ago or whatever. And then other moments where you're just like, this is why he shouldn't be starting, or we can sell him if we can, or he should be nothing more than depth option. I get both sides of that scale. But over the course of the same time period, he has more goal contributions than Rodrigo in fewer matches in a harder league. So I feel like sometimes people overrate how good Rodrigo actually is. I don't think he's a bad player. I think they're different players, but I think sometimes people look at his, and this is just domestic league numbers. I'm not including Champions League. I think Rodrigo gets a lot of bonus points because he did some great things in Champions League. I think that actually does matter. I think that maybe tips the scale slightly, but when it comes to domestic production, Martinelli is actually a bit better than Rodrigo. He certainly had a better goal scoring season than Rodrigo's ever had. Rodrigo, I think, is a bit more creative, which is kind of maybe what you need if you're going to go out and buy a striker. You need players to go in that can put chances on the platter for that finisher that aren't just Saka and Odegaard. I think that's actually really important. But if you can do that, you can just get Nico Williams to do it. I think Nico Williams being more malleable still because he's younger. I think his frame is probably overall more broadly it would suit the Premier League better because he has a bigger frame. He's taller. You can if he puts on a bit more muscle, he'd kind of be like a Wilfred Zaha in a way, who was really hard to get off the ball because he was stronger. He was taller for a winger. He was really difficult to deal with. So good one-on-one, but probably a better version of that, so to speak. But I think both Rodrigo and Nico Williams and Gittins bring that pace on the ball, that directness that we really need, and the consistent left winger to be able to unlock the blocks. Because one of the things I keep telling people is, even if we want to be more direct when we're in transition, most teams are still going to try to sit back and play a bit deeper if they can, right? So one of the ways you can get teams out of their shape is to have people who are technically gifted to pull them out of their shape. Because if someone like Williams comes in, beats his marker on the left, down the left-hand side, all of a sudden defense has to react to his threat. Someone has to be pulled out of shape to go respond to him, and that creates space for another person. Or if they don't react to him, he gets a goal-scoring chance, right? So having, we'll call them chaotic players like that are consistently chaotic, make a difference. So I do kind of feel like, for me, the biggest thing that my concern is we need to make sure we have enough funding to do everything we have to do, because Arteta and Ornstein himself today or yesterday alluded to how big of a sum of this really is for us, right? So we know we're going after a striker, we know we're going after a winger, we know we're going after Zubimendi, who's basically done, backup keeper, maybe another midfielder, maybe another defender, depending on sales. So there's a lot of business to be done, and it's not going to be cheap, right? Or it shouldn't be cheap because we've got the raise the floor and the ceiling. So for me, I feel like I don't think we'll be able to get a star winger and a star striker. I think you're going to have to go with a star for one and a more long-term high ceiling option for the other. If I had to choose, it would be like a Joker as center forward and Nico Williams or Jamie Gittins as the left winger. If you get a Shesko, maybe you make Rodrigo the winger, right? I don't think you can do both. I don't think you're looking at a summer where you get like Rodrigo and Gyökeres, right? Or Rodrigo and Isak. That's so costly. All the money's gone, basically, right? So you have to like kind of there's some push pull give and take there in terms of like what you can do. If I had to choose, I think it's probably easier to Gittins is technically homegrown, right? So that counts a lot for that quota. Less adaptive issues coming back to England, I think. I think he suits us quite well. I've seen a lot of him because obviously he's a Dortmund, but I'd be fine with Nico Williams as well. I worry with Nico Williams. I just worry that he also is very inconsistent in his end product, right? So, and the wage, like, however, if you want like 300,000 pounds a week or whatever off the back of 2 decent-ish seasons, I think is a bit extreme. So it depends. But my big concern is center forward. But I personally think we would be doing. I don't want Rodrigo. I'll say that, and that might be unpopular, but I actually would be upset at that deal personally. So
I don't think Rodrigo's the best fit. Like if just off the top of my head, the wingers that I would take over Rodrigo based on fit and based on ability, I think would be Nico Williams, Antoine Semenyo, Rafael Leao, Bradley Barcola. Who else? I feel like I'm missing someone. I don't know. Oh, Anthony Gordon. Yeah, I think I would take all those guys over Rodrigo. By the way, left wing market is great right now. Honestly, I sometimes wonder if we should go the way of PSG and sign like Nico Williams and Semenyo and then just kind of like rotate wingers into the center forward position like that. Or, if you want to be really fun, Semenyo and Leao, something like that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys out there. Yeah, I think Rodrigo strikes me as a guy who really has to be central in order to, to really get the best out of him. And I just don't think that's what we ask our left winger to do. Obviously, like they will get central from time to time, but I think especially out on the left, we want that winger to be someone who can win out on the touchline and then get into those central areas. So I'm just not sure if Rodrigo's built to do that in the Premier League. Kind of on the subject of Martinelli, do you think there's a chance, or I guess, what do you think of this idea that maybe Martinelli's a 9?
No.
We've tried that. It didn't. No.
Yeah, I'm with John. I think that's a silly way to go. Personally,
it worked at Liverpool.
Martinelli never played for Liverpool. No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. It's just we've tried that. I don't think that he just doesn't do it. He's not. He doesn't have the technical ability to play that position in a way that we need it to kind of move the needle for us. Right? We need. And I said that. I tweeted this out or X'd it. I don't know what the hell you call it anymore.
Stick a tweet.
Whatever. I put it out there into that cesspool that is that website that we need to stop playing these cute games with our striking, right? So we need to stop trying to be cute with our striking. If Martinelli doesn't cut it at the winger, don't try to pigeonhole him or try to rather put a square peg in a round hole and put him as a striker. And because it worked at Liverpool and stuff like that. I get why you would say that, but I think we need to just go out and get someone that we know has a history there and that can do the job. We know Martinelli is a good player. He's a very talented player. I think he's a great option to have on the bench. I think maybe one of the best left wingers in the Premier League off the bench in terms of rotational option. You have him and Trossard, whatever happens there, whatever. Point is, get someone who's designated to be there. Get a designated striker. Don't try to start fitting and fidgeting and tinkering. This is not the time to do that. Now is not the time to try to have a hypothesis about what Martinelli could provide as a striker, and then hang your hat on it. Maybe he could develop into that as a rotational option. If he could be a rotational option on the left, I think he's more than capable of being a rotational option in a center forward position. If we want to try that out in game, maybe early stages in Europe, maybe on some of the early stages in cup competitions, we could try that. But in terms of an actual strategy, I would say no.
But I don't think any of us would also choose him over Havertz as a 9 either, right? Because presumably if we go out and get whoever is a center forward, that means Havertz isn't starting at center forward, which is fine, but it means he's the chief option as secondary in that position. And also elsewhere, Havertz can maybe, we can revisit like the left 8 question or whatever. I'm with John, and one of the reasons why I think it's crucial we don't fall down the trap of like trying to find ingenious solutions with players is because we don't have to talk about this broadly, but we know that, and we've all said it on this podcast before, that we know City aren't going to mess around in the market, and we already know that City are going after some ridiculously talented players this summer who are going to up their level, who are going to put them right back into the conversation. This is after, someone like a Marmoush will have been better than at this point, that kind of thing. So we have to be as close to perfect as possible. And as John said, don't muck about with it. Just go out and get the things that you need that will raise your level and raise your capacity to keep your challenge sustainable and source solutions for things that we're deficient in. There's no world where I want to see a conversation this summer about Arsenal can't find a target they want, but Arteta is considering rotating Martinelli. I'll flip my desk. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no conversation space for that to me in my mind. So, not saying that you think there should be, but I just don't think it's something we should entertain. I think we're beyond that point. We're in the point in the project where we know we can afford the things that we need to go get. So just go get them. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, I'm still in the spend whatever it takes for Isak camp.
And I think that's a bit extreme because that's too much. I think that's too. I get the sentiment. I think the sentiment is correct, but I think people underestimate how much Newcastle will justify charging to sell him. You know what I mean?
I get that, and if they make Champions League, we probably won't go for him. But that's why, even with our team looking like it's going to be without several options going into next weekend, I would really like a win over Newcastle next week. But before we get out of here, you did mention that City are going after some really serious players this summer. I mean, they've been linked to Wirtz. They also just got linked to Reinders, who, a midfield of Rodri, Wirtz, and Reinders is just off the charts ridiculous. Just, I think that would be immediately the best midfield in the Premier League. Maybe one of the best midfields. I mean, definitely like a top 2 midfield in Europe. And, I don't think I've seen my timeline blow up the way that it did when David Ornstein dropped that tweet about City inquiring about Reinders. And I guess my question is, they've largely been out of contention throughout this entire season. But how worried are you about City going into next season?
I mean, you have to be. And I also definitely want to know John's thoughts. I don't think I got to see John think about this either in the group chat or on Twitter, but the fact that they chucked $250 million at the problem in January showed you that they're not going to fuck around in the summer, right? So if they're going to shell out £400 or £500 million across 6 months or whatever it is to make sure they're challenging again, and that's what I think people understand. That's kind of, I think, part of the frustration of the fans that we didn't win the Premier League is that we knew this would happen. You knew City were going to be like, well, no. Now status quo resumed starting next season because we're going to chuck however much money we need to fix the problems. So I don't want to get into like too much of the rhetoric around Wirtz. I still think that he might go to Bayern, but the fact that they're going after those kind of players shows that we need that same type of mentality. Identify what you need. They know they need to replace De Bruyne, right? They know they need to replace Gundogan. So they're going after the 2 best players on the market to do that, which is Wirtz and Reinders. There's no reason why they wouldn't, and they can afford to do it. So why wouldn't they, right? Yeah. And that's despite having Phil Foden, who technically could just be De Bruyne's in-house replacement, But instead, they're going after Florian Wirtz, which is, to me, a bit crazy when I think about it. But it shows that we have to have that same mentality. Like if you can spend the money and you know you need these pieces to come in so you can go back to competing again and pushing for trophies, then spend it and just do it and kind of make it happen. I think that's where John's been at for the last 2 years, pretty much. So
just do it. That's it. Just do the thing. Just do it. Like, stop with the cute fixes. Stop with the excuses. Like, if you can't do it, let us know that you can't do it, and then we need to figure out, okay, why can't we do it? All right, but if you can do it, do it. I don't. Maybe it took this Champions League. Now that we're showing that we're a force in the Champions League, players are going to even want to play here even more because there's a chance that they can get to a final maybe and win. So buy the player. And like the fact that City are doing, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, way in the beginning of the podcast, when I was talking about, just to bring it full circle, about some concerns that we would have when you're looking at this season and look at next season, and when you're dropping the ball now while other teams, you can't capitalize on them not doing well. You look at City, they've identified weaknesses and they're going to fix it. You bet your ass they're going to fix it. Now, City hasn't really been much of a relevant factor this season. But next season, they're going to be. Maybe Chelsea gets their shit together. They're going to be a relevant factor. Maybe Man United or Spurs, God forbid, win Europa League. And now they're charged and they're ready to go. And now, they have some money from winning that. And then now they can spend in the market and they can actually do what they're supposed to do and get some cohesion. Now they might become a factor. So, like, the point is that you can't dilly-dally. You can't dilly-dally. Don't dilly-dally, Arsenal. That's the worst thing you can do. Don't. Do the thing. Do it. That's it. I've been saying that for years. Like, buy the players. Why are we trying to be cute? Stop trying to be cute. We get it. You're clever. You could turn a winger into a striker. We get it. You could get Marino and he turns into friggin' Giroud regen. I get it. Cool. Stop it.
No, I mean, this is why I said I wanted to have a rant on this subject. I don't really have the energy at this point, but this is, I mean, John, honestly, I'm pretty much right there with you because, like, I remember last summer we had just come off an 89-point season. We lost the title on the final day, and not because of anything we did really, but because City were just that damn good, right? And I thought we were going to go into the summer and get better, right? We were great. Let's get better. And instead, the approach was, oh, well, let's make sure the floor is good. Let's raise the floor. The floor is fine. You know the best way to raise the floor? Raise the ceiling. Buy good players who could overtake your starters. There you go. That's your floor, right? Yeah. But we didn't do that. And so, we signed Marino, who I think has had a mixed season. He's been excellent at center forward. Clearly, that's not a long-term thing we want to do. I think he's a little hit or miss in midfield. And then you signed Calafiori. I love the talent of Calafiori. I think he's a special player. The guy's missed most of the season, injured. And then Neto, whatever. And then Sterling, that's one of the biggest busts I've witnessed as an Arsenal fan, right? And that was the summer. That was what we did after we finished with 89 points. And then in January, right, when City are out of contention, they have spiraled, right? And we are 5 points behind Liverpool despite the shit show that we have weathered, right? And Aston Villa offer us Ollie Watkins for £60 million. And we offer them 40, a third of a month later, right? I want to frame it like that because this is the January window. You have to make decisions quickly. You have to do things quickly. You can't wait 9-10 days and then send 2/3 we dilly-dallied, right? So we did that, and then we finished without signing any sort of offensive reinforcement. Jesus had torn his ACL. Saka had torn his hamstring. Havertz was crawling at the end of games, right? We had nobody in that position, and Sterling was useless. I should add that in there. Sterling was useless. We had nobody.
You could have like a running position that he's been useless since we signed him, pretty much.
Yeah, I just want a ticker underneath this that just says Sterling was useless. But like, And in the meantime, Aston Villa offered us the third best striker in the Premier League over the last couple seasons, and we said no to that. And then they went and got Marco Asensio, and they went and got Marcus Rashford, and then City went and signed Omar Marmoush. And all these moves happened, and we just sat there and twiddled our thumbs, and we're like, oh, well, let's just finish out the season. Like, we'll be back next season. No, we had an opportunity this season. How do you think things would have looked if we signed Ollie Watkins? Obviously, it's not a guarantee that we're going to win the league. It's not a guarantee that we're going to win the Champions League, but maybe we would have finished a few points better. Maybe we would have turned it into a race still, and we wouldn't have fallen 15 points behind Liverpool or whatever it is now. And then maybe, because I think Liverpool are a team of, how do I put this kindly, really online people, right? I think Liverpool are a very overconfident team at times. If you are still behind those guys, breathing down their necks, 3 to 5 points behind them in March, I think that starts to get in their heads. And we didn't do that. And, I just think maybe saying that we wrote the season off is too harsh. But I do think just we viewed it as, I think we were just too okay with letting this season pass us by. And, City are going to be back with a bang next season. Liverpool are going to be just as good as they were, if not better, maybe a little worse, depending on how the summer goes. It's not going to be easy next season. So, I mean, maybe this has turned into a bit of a rant, and I apologize. But, yeah.
Go on, Sham. Rant away.
Yeah. This is kind of the problem that I had with how we approach the windows, and I just think I don't know, just the sort of attitude that we've seen to have is it's okay if this season is a wash, and I'm not as accepting of that as the board seemed to be. So that's that's all I got from me. But Am I over the line on that, or
no? I've been saying this for two years now, almost 3 years now.
You're the one who said Odegaard was a single point of failure. So
he's look. We're not going to get into that, but we're not going to get into that. But look, I think Odegaard's arguably our most. No, we're not going to get into that.
John's trying really hard to mute himself, so let's give him that grace so he can actually do that. I don't think you're too far off the mark. I do feel like I'm always, like I said, I'll always be the kind of person to find, or at least try to understand the context. So my thought behind it is they didn't see Watkins as worth a $60 million investment because they were planning on big investment this summer. That's kind of how I rationalize their decision making. However, at the same time, you can't then just say what we had was enough as well. So there had to have been a better short-term solution than nothing. And that's something that both of you said on previous podcasts, and that I agree. Something would have been better than nothing. A loan for play to Mourinho, but I do think that like a short-term deal for Asensio could have been probably a better solution or whatever. And you know what I mean, or whatever it is. Go on, John. Yeah, please.
The counterpoint to that is Sterling. I think nothing probably would have been better than Sterling.
Sure, but I also think no one, even Arteta himself, would have expected Sterling to be this bad.
True.
And so I think that's the context applied. I think in hindsight 2020, we can say unequivocally, I think for me it's a worse deal than Willian. I don't think that's odd to say, really.
I think Willian had more goal contributions.
He sure did. He absolutely did. And so I think that context applied, it's an absolute disaster. But I think even if Sterling had turned out to be halfway decent, I still think we still should have done something in January, right? I think Havertz's injury was just really, really bad luck, obviously. But I still think when you look at everything, to go on to confirm your push for the season. So sometimes clubs don't need a deal and they'll still go out and do a January deal to make sure that their push has legs still, that the wheels won't fall off the bus, right? Like an insurance policy, if you will. So the fact that we were limited on insurance policies and didn't try to acquire one, whereas some of the clubs will get extra insurance policies when they don't even need one, kind of shows that different mentality. So I do feel like, this, like, I think it just puts on even more pressure, not just on the business we have to do, but that goes back to that whole question of, if we don't win anything this coming season, do we have to ask questions about the whole thing, basically? But
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's something that you have to do in hindsight, but yeah, I think I think the January window really is something that does beg a lot of frankly, I think it warrants a bit of an inquisition, but um yeah, I think we've certainly done that. We'll probably do it again a few times over the summer, and yeah, it's disappointing. But we'll leave it there because we're hitting the hour and a half mark. But thank you so much for being here, for joining us and letting us. We kind of bounced around today. I liked it. It was good. But yeah. So thank you for taking the time, and we really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this pod, please do consider following us on Twitter at Not That Gooner, or on Blue Sky, notthatgooner.bsky.social, or you can follow us on Instagram at Not That Kind of Gooner. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Not That Kind of Gooner. All of these pods are uploaded to the YouTube channel, both in audio and video form. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do follow or subscribe, whichever one, and leave us a 5-star review. Really does help get the pod out there. And yeah, we'll be back with you shortly. We've got a lot of summer pods planned. We've been talking about draft episodes, kind of like mock drafts in terms of Arsenal all time, Premier League all time, stuff like that. We'll also do some themed pods as well, just kind of reviewing the season and kind of looking back on some stuff. So we'll keep the content going even during the off season. So be sure to stick around for that. Anyway, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow me on Blue Sky, bsky.social, or shamsdale.bsky.social. That was John. You can follow him on Twitter at 305cast and on Blue Sky at yellowribbons.bsky.social. And that was Drew. You can follow on Twitter at GeeChyKid and on Blue Sky at supplyanddemandery.bsky.social. But we'll probably be back with you for another pod later in the week. Just talking about a few more things. I'm sure there'll be some news coming up. We'll preview the Newcastle match in a little more depth. And yeah, it'll be a good one. So don't miss it. But I think I've taken up enough of everyone's time. So we'll leave it there. And until next time, take care and bye. Bye.